Okay, so this will be the third and final set of slides for Chapter 16 for Bio 211 at Norwalk Community College. And again, I'm going to start off with, again, these do not replace you reading the textbook and spending some time and thinking about what we're talking about. But I'm saying that too many times now, and I'm kind of hoping you're not tuning me out. Let's start with this, though. We're going to map the primary somatosensory area. So when we last spoke, I said I was going to do a review. And what I want to make sure you understand is that the first set of slides were, if Mother Nature is going to make a set of receptors for you to detect the outside world, she can have exteroreceptors that are on the outside of the body. She can have interoreceptors on the inside of the body, and she can put proprioceptors in different distinct locations that can monitor the movement inside your body. Having told you that, we then said, look, you need to have a first order neuron that will activate a second order neuron that will activate a third order neuron. And I wanted to make sure you guys paid attention to the fact that this first order neuron is a myelinated unipolar neuron that will activate the second order neuron and the third order neuron. And together these are interneurons. There we go again. Let's do this. Oops, got rid of all of that. Sorry, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's go like this. Let's go like this. Here's you right here. Again, cartoon is probably going to get a little bit sloppier. Apologize for that, but don't want to spend too much time on this. First order neuron activates second order neuron, activates third order neuron. And notice here the cell terminal, cell body. So you can see the directionality here. All right? And remember, these guys here were interneurons, so I'll just put INT. Now remember, this one here ends up at the cortex, which is what this cartoon is trying to show you. So, depending on the pathway of the different types of the somatosensory structures ascending, the thalamus is down here, right? So our thalamus is down here, which means our third order neuron for, say, a bite on your wrist from an ant is going to send that stimuli here. And that's the way the third order neuron would work, right? Okay. So that means that somewhere a decussation event occurred, meaning so some sensation was collected at the wrist of the body. First order neuron activated our second order neuron. These interneurons sent the information to the thalamus. The thalamus then allowed us to activate our third order neuron here so that we could activate that unique piece of the cortex. Magic happens then. Your textbook does not discuss with you how you actually activate the response. What I want you to remember is that there are association. I'm going to put this here, right? I'm going to put that right there. I'm going to go like that. I'm going to say that there are association. This should be from chapter 14. Association fibers. So, commissural, ural, and projection fibers. Projection. Projection fibers that are sending information as it comes in. Let's get back up to where you belong here. Comes in, and so imagine you get some information here, then it's going to bounce around. I don't mean randomly bounce around. It knows where it's supposed to be going, but somehow that decision to do something with that sensory information will allow us to now activate motor pathways. Okay? Where you have an upper motor neuron that will always now activate a lower motor neuron, which are always your skeletal muscle lower motor neurons, and they're always myelinated. Okay? For us to refine which pathway, how much, the intensity, means we'll also use the basal ganglia as well as the cerebellum. So in the background, you're always thinking to yourself, if I'm going to pick up a pen, and I'm not going to pick it up like I'm lifting up a 25-pound weight. I know the pen is light, therefore I'm going to have to lift it up a little bit. Right? So if you get that, this should make sense. What's going to happen, of course, is we're going to separate we're going to separate the types of pathways that are used. And we tend to think of direct motor pathways that are originating inside the cortex, meaning we'll use the precentral gyrus to say, look, I want to pick my nose. So what pathways do I have available to me that can actually create movement in the limbs and the trunk, or at the head, wiggle your ears, move your nose, versus lifting your finger up to pick your nose. These direct motor pathways, primarily, we call these pyramidal. Indirect motor pathways are extrapyramidal, and this is where it's important you remember where the pyramids were. These are the anterior surfaces of the medulla, which means pathway has to come down through the anterior surface of the medulla, and you'll see how that happens. If we're going to originate motor from that precentral gyrus, okay, precentral gyrus here inside the cartoon, that's the red piece in front here. We want to move your lips. This is the part of the cortex you use. You want to blink at somebody, okay, eyelid right there. You're going to go, huh? Blink, okay. Imagine you want to lift your hand up, move your hand. This is where all this is going to actually occur. And what we want to do is we want to now regulate how all of these things are going to actually move. So you move more cortical areas devoted to those muscles that are involved in skilled, complex, or delicate movement. So if that makes sense, think about saying the word decussation. Okay? It's not an easy word to say. It requires skilled, delicate movements of the tongue to actually make things happen. Okay, so having said that, let's take a look at the cortical spinal pathways. There are two of them here. You'll see there's a lateral and there's an anterior. Look down here, lateral and anterior. And what I want you to do, and I'm hoping you do this by practicing, is going for us to actually activate target muscles that are the distal parts of limbs. We have to use the lateral cortical pathway. If I want to target muscles that are at the trunk and the proximal parts of limbs, I have to use the anterior cortical spinal pathway. Okay, so both are cortical spinal pathways, depending on what part of the body you want to activate, meaning what muscles that are surrounding the bones that will pull on the joints are determined which pathway we'll use. And the significance here is this. Lateral cortical spinal pathways, notice what they do. They arise at that precentral gyrus, they travel down through the cerebral pundicles, they travel to the pyramids, and they decuss in the pyramids. If you jump over here to the anterior cortical spinal pathway, you'll notice because we're moving muscles of the trunk and the proximal parts of the limbs, we travel down all the way straight through the pyramids, through the anterior cortical spinal tract, where decussation now occurs in the spinal cord itself. So it's medulla versus spinal cord. It is pyramids, decussation occurring inside the spinal cord. Okay. And again, it's about what part of the body do you want to move? That's really the real question here. If you want to move this part of the body, you have to use this pathway. If you use this pathway, this is the way the upper motor neuron, let's get back to that, I don't want to mess that up on you. Upper motor neuron activates the lower motor neuron. We can do that with a corticobulbar pathway as well. Okay? And you're going to see here the corticobulbar pathway originates on the gray matter, travels down adjacent to the thalamus, travels down through the pedicles. Now it's going to exit out through the facial nerve or out through the hypoglossal nerve. Here we're facial expressions. You want somebody to see you smiling versus pouting, or muscles of the tongue. You're sticking them out to actually tell somebody you're unhappy. These would use this pathway, which means we're not targeting the trunk, the neck, the arms, both proximal and or distal parts of limbs, not just your arms, but also your legs, right? So you can use this as a tool to tease these types of pieces of information out. Homework assignment for you, okay? I know I haven't given many of those in these, but I want you to go look up what these rubrospinal, tectospinal, vestibulospinal, reticulospinal tracts are doing. You're going to notice these are nuanced, basic, not necessarily highly refined motions in the body. Generally speaking, an extrapyramidal means they're not traveling through the pyramids, which means they've originated in the brain stem. Okay, so Mother Nature has a specific reason why she wants your body to be a specific movement or a specific posture. Okay, so when you're looking that up, that's what I'm hoping you're going to pay attention to. Well, how do we actually modulate this? Well, the cerebellum coordinates and smooths the contractions of skeletal muscle during skilled movements. I mean, if I give you a 25-pound weight in one hand and a 40-pound weight in another, and I have one shoe on your foot and I have no shoe on your other foot, meaning right and left foot, and I made you walk, your cerebellum would want to help you to smooth out all of those different movements. And how it does it, of course, is this. And this is very complex, and in fact, this is sort of trivial in its analysis, but somehow you've made the decision to make some movements, and you'll notice it passes around the thalamus here, and you go to the pons, and the pons is saying, okay, we know there's an intention to do something here, and what we want to do is we want to send some information to the cerebellum. The cerebellum will give you the corrective cues, but it won't just send it directly back up to the thalamus, so you can lift up your right foot faster than your left foot or something like that, right? It's also going to send it here, where what we're doing is we're now sending indirect pathways, the postural modifications. Remember, I said you have one shoe on, another shoe off, which means one foot is closer to the planet of the earth, the surface of the earth. The other one's not. One foot will feel more pain than the other. You get the idea. At least I hope you do. Okay? And what's going to happen now is you're going to get the consequence of that from the proprioceptors, the joints, the vestibular apparatus, as well as your eyes. Okay? This is a lot of information here in number 2, but, generally speaking, this is how your body makes the adaptations required for you to keep moving. So, in the last couple of minutes here, what are we doing? Well, if you are a sensing organism, it means that information is important for you to make decisions. And we have to have enough sensory input so that we bypass or we get to the reticular formation activity, okay, our reticular activating center or something like that, right? What I mean by that is enough stimulus can keep you aware, okay, or let you go to sleep so you can collect the information. When you're asleep, you're still collecting sensory inputs. They just don't have enough stimuli to wake you up. When you're in class and you're trying to learn something, there's a lot of things going on here, but some of it is you want to be there, some of it is you don't want to be there. Think about those moments when you're actually learning something. You go to a bar and you're trying to get somebody's telephone number. Think about how focused you are and how much you remember all of the interactions. And it's funny the way that the brain integrates all of those functions. Because learning and memory, of course, is short-termed, okay, and long-term. And the purpose of maybe putting these together for you is so you can actually come back and listen to them again. You don't have a whole lot of time to do that. And what I'm hoping you're not doing is you're not just listening to these things in lieu of reading your textbook, right? Because the details, the fine details, the work of reading the word and learning the vocabulary is what's adding to both your short-term and your long-term memory, okay? How do you consolidate all of it so it actually becomes useful to you? Well, you get sleep. Okay, and to get sleep, you want to be in REM sleep, and there are 4 stages of it. Do not try to learn this stuff for exam. This stuff's the interesting stuff that unfortunately we don't tend to test you on, right? But when we've consolidated all those experiences, now you actually have the ability to acquire new information. And remember, those are going to be using the association, the commissural, and the projection fiber, so that you actually reinforce these things. And they're stored inside specific locations inside your brain. So if I see something like this on somebody's practical, right? They see the first 2 letters of a word, and then they misspell the rest of it because they've confused the entire word, right? What I've learned as people are learning is the practice of actually writing the entire word out allows you, literally with your pencil on a piece of paper, or you're writing it onto your palm or something like that. It allows you to actually store that where you can now retrieve it properly. Okay? So, at the end of the day, you're finishing up chapter 16 right now, and this is sensory input that's been converted into motor output, and I've given you specific pathways. So, you've got 3 sensory pathways to learn about. You've got 2 major motor output pathways to learn. How would you do that? Well, you can do it right before an exam, right? Where you're trying to cram it in there, and I can tell you it won't be there when you need it. You can maybe practice for a couple of days before the exam, where literally you start actually maybe tracing pathways up and down your body, or you've drawn them out. But at the end of the day, you've asked yourself types of questions where you've changed the scenario, where it's like, I need to know if I'm going to lift my pinky up off of the table. Okay, I know I'm activating distal muscles. Which pathway would actually do that? And if I lifted the pinky up and I put it into a flame, what type of sensation is that? And would I pull the pinky away from the flame, or wouldn't I? That's what you want to be doing here. Okay, so let's just finish this off. With that memory consolidation, ultimately, we are organisms that tell stories. So by now, I'm sure you've seen me inside class try to put entire stories together so that you can, just like I did with the pinky, you're lying down, you lift the pinky up, what motor pathway was activated? You move it towards a flame. What type of sensory input is that? Do you remember now the first order, second order, and third order part? Fantastic. You're doing better than 90% of the population on the face of the planet. Hell, truth be told, you're probably doing better than 99% of the population. The difference between a C and a B and an A in this class, of course, is it's this type of pathway. And because it's on the distal part of a limb, I should say the upper part of the trunk, it's going to ascend on a specific pathway. And do you remember what that pathway is? So that's a pretty good place to stop. But I'm going to draw this cartoon. Okay? I'm going to draw this one cartoon that I'm going to leave you with so that you can hopefully come up with your own shorthand version of this. Right? And I want you to see something. I want you to see the color that I'm using. And hopefully you're going to see that it mimics what you see inside your textbook. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go like that. I'm going to go like that. Okay? And from this alone, you should be able to see, I'm going to put this thing down so I don't muck it up. You should be able to see that here's our first order neuron. This should be myelinated. This is a unipolar neuron activating second order neuron that will always synapse inside the thalamus unless you are the olfactory nerve. Magic happens up here because this is the cortex. And now we have an upper motor neuron activating a lower motor neuron. The second homework assignment, put the arrows in here properly, meaning if this is the dendrites, this means this is the axon terminal, which means the cell body is here, which means the axon terminal is there, so on and so forth. Learn to do this properly, because then you know the cell body is here, and you know the axon terminal is there, and you know there's a cell body here, and there's an axon terminal there, and that means that skeletal muscle fiber there. Okay? Have a wonderful night. I'll speak with you guys later.